Welcome to the root of all success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs unlocked success and how their stories can help you do the same. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason has built multi-million-dollar businesses that have been featured in Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur magazine. His life's mission now is helping entrepreneurs live what he calls #the exit lifestyle. Introducing TEDx speaker, mastermind leader, author, entrepreneur, cigar aficionado, motorcycle enthusiast, and host of the root of all success, the real Jason Duncan. The real Jason Duncan.
Welcome to episode 102 of The Root of All Success. I am the real Jason Duncan. Thank you for tuning in today. We've got a guest all the way from France today. He's actually not French. He's an American, but he's been on a 29 country world tour with his family over the last couple of years. He's visited 29 countries. He's spending time hanging out with the people that he loves the most. And, he is a successful guy. And he talks about what that means to him, about being genuinely happy. And that's what he's been able to accomplish. He set up his business to run in a way that he doesn't have to be involved in the day to day. And that might sound familiar. As we get into this, what you're going to see is that he's got these 7 particular things that he teaches about how entrepreneurs like you can get out of the weeds of daily operations. And you're going to find, if you know and follow my content, that his 7 steps and my 4 steps that I teach are very similar. As a matter of fact, the steps completely overlap in a couple of places. And this means that it's possible to get yourself out of the weeds. It is possible to not work 80 hours a week. And if you're in the car right now driving to the office and you're a little bit wondering why you have to do that every day after all these years of owning that business, then you need to pay attention to what Jeff's going to talk about today. And then also there's going to be an offer at the end that you could take advantage of. Jeff's going to offer you a free 30-minute strategy session to see what you might be able to do to get past some of those obstacles. And of course, there's opportunities abound. There are abounding opportunities everywhere for you to figure that stuff out. So I'm glad that you're listening today. Thank you for being here. So let me tell you a little bit about Jeff. So Jeff Davis, he's an entrepreneur, of course, and he's going to tell a story today on the show about how he worked every day, all day long, every night, every weekend, 80 plus hours a week he was working, to giving all that up and starting to travel the world and visiting 29 countries with his family. And he attributes that ability to go from that overworked, no happiness, no success, all of that, to a life of leisure and still making the money that he needs to cover his bills and be able to travel, by focusing on doing these 7 particular things, which we're going to talk about at the end of the show. And when he teaches this, and he says, when entrepreneurs go through and commit to these 7 steps, they can dramatically build scalable businesses that don't need them, and to get out of the weeds so that they can pursue other passions in life. He's the founder and chairman of a national community of entrepreneurs and CEOs called 12 Mavens. He started an event called Plan the Attack. He's going to talk about how he decided to start that event after going on a little introspection retreat by himself, if as it were. But he helps pull back the curtain on these 7 steps every day through 12 Mavens, which is a peer group for entrepreneurs and CEOs. And Jeff is just a fantastic guy. We have a lot in common. We have a great conversation on the show today. So please help me welcome Jeff Davis. Jeff, welcome to the show, my man.
I'm pumped to be here.
All the way from France. So you're not even here in the States with us today. So you're traveling, doing that. What is it? 29 countries? Is that what you're on this 2-year journey?
We've already been to all 29. We're taking a victory lap right now.
So when you heading back, or what are you going to do?
Don't know.
All right, folks, listen to this. This guy that we're going to be talking to today in this show, and I probably already said this in intro, but he and I do a lot of the same stuff, and he's living his version of what I would call the exit lifestyle with his family, traveling the world. I'm not a world traveler. I'd rather get in my RV and just drive somewhere. He's flying. But you're going to love this show because Jeff and I don't know each other, but that's the cool thing about doing this podcast is you get to meet some cool people. So Jeff, so tell me, just who are you? Just introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Yeah, life lifelong entrepreneur. Always started some kind of thing since I was a kid, even though I didn't realize what I was doing. I just would like something and I'd turn it into something. When I was in my early 20s, I loved skateboarding, and I found a wood manufacturer, and then I started calling every skate shop in America with the skateboards out of my little apartment. Anytime I've been passionate about something, I turned it into some kind of a business. Other than that, lousy guitar player, and I like going to places.
So skateboarding was kind of your thing early on, and lousy guitar player. So you and I have we were talking pre-show about how many things we have in common down to our initials, and our assistants, both are named Megan, and we do the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it probably keeps going. And by the way, I'm an old dude now, but I still watch skating videos on YouTube almost every day.
Well, like I'm not much into skateboarding. I know who Tony Hawk is, but isn't he like in his 40s now?
Yeah, it helps to have him older than me. That helps a lot. I'm happy that I have people like Brad Pitt and Clooney are just forever be older than me. So I can always be like, well, they're 60.
You know what? I think about stuff like that too, because I'm 47. So as I get older, I'm looking at these dudes that are still, they've got it. They're still looking good. They're still in shape. They're still doing, they're successful, and they just don't look like an old dude. They don't look like a dad. They're just like an old. And I'm like, okay, there's hope. There's hope. Yeah, we got hope.
Yeah, that's right.
I love these Instagram memes that shows these side by side pictures of a guy who's 60 and another guy who's 60, and one looks like what you would imagine a 60-year-old looks like, with the ridiculous clothes, a huge gut, and then you got the other guy who looks ripped, and like, okay, I gotta aim for that second guy.
Yeah, it is amazing when you see a picture, like an old black and white photo of somebody with white hair and everything, and you realize they're probably younger than you or whatever. It's pretty crazy. It's different. People say, with the average lifespan stretching out so much, that it is a different thing now. But then you also hear, like I heard Bill Burr the other day say, people say 50's the new 40. No, it's 50.
That's
but
right.
I don't know. But I don't know, man. I'm hoping to beat all the odds and still look and act way younger for a long time.
You and me both, man. You and me both. So what did you do? What was your first, I guess, official? Yeah, I use that word official loosely, but business. What was your first official business? Was it the skateboard?
I'm not sure. This first one kind of teeters on official, because I did do transactions and I did have customers all over America, but it also was, I wouldn't say that official, was that skateboard business where I cold called. I mean, I was doing all these things that I didn't know what they were called. Like, I was mailing letters to skate shops, and I realized that was like direct response marketing. And then I was calling them all, and I didn't know that's called cold calling. And I was just doing that stuff, but I would helping my way through college. In between classes, I would sit there in my crappy little apartment, and I'd cold call every skate shop in America and sell boards all over the country. And then I did that until I just didn't want to do it anymore, after a while. And then in 2003, I was passionate about drawing. I could draw pretty well, but I didn't want to be a starving artist. And I started a company that did medical illustrations for trial lawyers. And so you think about a case where somebody's been injured or they've had a surgery, and my business would visually communicate the details of that case for them in an easier to understand, more compelling way. And that was the first real business where I started scaling that, and I started hiring people, and I had an office and going to conferences, and grew that to law firms across about 40 states around the country. And at one point grew it to where we had a 2-story office in the middle of downtown with all these employees everywhere doing all this stuff. And I started that in a little 500 square foot studio apartment. It was apartment 1104, but I called it Suite 1104 on my first business cards.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, man, that was my anthem.
Me too. Well, again, I'm a lousy guitarist. I didn't mention that earlier. I was about to mention that. So we got a lot of this in common. I'm also somewhat of an artist, got accepted to 2 art colleges and wanted to design cars for a living. Ended up going into ministry instead, which is a whole nother story that I could tell on somebody else's show, not yours, not this show. But you turned your artistic ability into a significant business in such a weird little niche. How in the world did that become a possibility and an opportunity to draw medical stuff for lawyers?
Yeah, it was pretty intentional, actually. Like I knew I wanted to draw stuff, but I didn't want to be a starving artist. And I started asking around and doing research, and I found out about medical illustration. And then I found out about medical illustration more specifically for litigation, because there's always a case, they have a budget, and so I started doing that. And I actually went to school for it and got a degree in it, which is a whole nother story. Dissecting human cadavers is on my my little resume, I guess. But then I got it to where, I was more, it was funny because I had that degree in it, but I was like way more into the marketing and the sales and building a business. Right almost from the very beginning, I was wanting to build a scalable business that I could sell. I wanted a business that could work with or without me, like pretty early on.
And you did sell that. You sold that to a biotech firm in 2014, right?
That's right.
So that's congratulations to you. So they even became a public company right after they bought you.
Yeah. And I took, in place of a bit of the cash, I took shares and ownership of the bigger company that I sold to, and still own a tiny little piece. I usually say a tiny little piece, and I let the high pitch indicate that it's a small percentage, but I took some shares for the bigger company.
So when you sold that in 2014, what was the next big entrepreneur move for you? What did you do next?
Yeah, for me, it was I was already daydreaming and fantasizing about this little cool community of entrepreneurs that could help each other out and serve as each other's little confidential think tank and meet together and hold each other accountable and do, like, I imagined having like this event, and I guess kind of backing it up a little bit. So on that, because people can hear a thing and be like, oh, wow, he started the thing and now it's in 40 states and yay. But like, there's so much pain and suffering, from that day one to the exit on the way, and learning things the hard, painful way. And I was working every night. I was working every weekend. 3 a.m., 4 a.m. with a suit and tie, coming or going to that office, and burning out, man. And I would look up at these big, tall buildings at 3 a.m. with all the lights out, and I'd pound my chest like I can outwork anybody, like an idiot. And but I was in my early 30s back when I first started, and I was in that warrior mode. But I had been grinding for a few years and realized I'm burning out and it's probably sucking for my wife. I got to figure something out.
So that was during the medical drawing company, or the medical legal trial presentation company. That was that company. You did all the
I went hardcore from day one, hit the ground running like Braveheart, running across the field with a sword out, like resolved to make it work. However, whatever it takes, I'm going all in. I'm going to do whatever it takes. However late I got to stay up, however far I have to run in the heat with a suit on, whatever I got to do. But after a while, you just wear out, it's like years of that pace. And then we had our first kid, our first baby. And that's really where it was like, holy crap, I got to figure something out. And so I promised my wife I'd figure something out. And I actually drove about almost an hour outside of where I was living, just get away with just a notepad and a pen. I was like, I'm just going to sit here for however many hours it takes, and I'm going to plan out like a better way, a better business, better life, just by myself. And this all ties into going from that last business to the next one. But I sat there for hours and hours and hours, and I started figuring it out and experimenting and doing this thing and trying to optimize that thing. And I had this plan, and then I went back again a year later, did it again and did it a little better, and it got a little better at planning. And after a few years, I was imagining, what if we had a ballroom with all these entrepreneurs, and we went through all these questions and took time to think out all this stuff together and brought in some badasses who could share some helpful insights, that have the past experience, that we could leverage. And then I did. So like I sold the company, and I booked a ballroom. I didn't know if anybody other than my mom was going to show up. And trust me, I was anxious as hell, because I was like, oh God. Because outside of like all the lawyers, nobody knew who I was. And
that was the beginning of 12 Mavens. Is that
well, right? I did this event, and I called it Plan the Attack.
Plan the Attack. Okay.
And I told everybody it's not called Plan a Pretty Good Year. This event's not called Plan a Year, kind of like last year. It's called Plan the Attack, an attack on your business, attack on your life as an entrepreneur. And I did that event first, and with the hope that if enough people were interested, instead of it being one day a year, we could do something more ongoing, and kind of what I was imagining, like building a little community. And so there was enough interest. And so a couple months later, we had the first meeting of 12 Mavens, which is what I do now.
So Plan the Attack started out as just your desire to get people to really, as entrepreneurs, really attack like you did when you started the medical company, right?
It sets out to do the hardest thing for an entrepreneur to do: sit still. And that's really the secret sauce. Is it forces you to sit still, disconnected from everything else for an entire day, from like the morning until dinner time. There's like, people didn't realize it when they got there, I had like an 80-page binder for each person with like all blank lines through the whole thing. And they're like, huh? Like, oh crap, we got to do stuff. But we do everything in like 3-4 minute increments. And we, interacted with each other and stuff.
So who was the inspiration, or what was the inspiration behind you saying, hey, I just got to get away and think and write? Because it sounds like you did that multiple times over several years. Who inspired, or what inspired you to do that?
I think what inspired me to do that was a million got a second questions from my staff, from customer client calls, from everything coming at you. I remember when I was a kid, I went water skiing for the first time. And I was kind of like hoping they didn't even ask me if I wanted to try it. I was rather just hang out on the boat. But I was like, okay, so I get on. All my friends had done it, and I'm holding on, right? And the boat's pulling me, and I'm going for a little bit, and then I fall. But for some reason, I just wasn't letting go of the handle thing, and it's just dragging me. My friends were like, "Let go, you idiot!" And I'm just like, I know, it's like I felt like if I let go, they're just gonna like leave me out here. I'll be out here for weeks, starving. Instead of like, the boat just turns around and scoops you up. But I was just like, they were like, don't let go. And years later, as I was growing that business, I used to flash to that memory in my head all the time. That feeling of the business was that boat, and I was just like too dumb to let go, and it's just pulling me along, and I was just like getting like beat up in the water, just getting dragged along, and it was just weird. I didn't intentionally connect those. It just, that memory just would like pop into my head, because that's what I felt, the same feeling. And so I used to get there at 3-4 in the morning just because I had so much to do. But I also noticed that I would get more done from 4 in the morning up till 9 a.m. than I would, for 8 hours of just normal hours.
That is really, really good story about the boat and a great analogy, because you're so right. So many entrepreneurs hold on to the rope, and what happens is, and I know as someone who's done that, and people who listening have done that. You most of the time you're not just skimming across the top of the water, that you go that pulls you under, and you're you get pretty deep under the water and get beat up because you're afraid to let go.
Sorry, and you might think like, well, this is what skiing's like. This is how it feels. This is what you do. And then you see some other person go by you doing like backflips and landing perfectly and, whatever, but all you know is what you know. Right. And so, but I realized there's got to be a better way. I know there's a better way. And I mean, I would try to consume. I wouldn't say there was any one person that told me like, get away from your office, as much as just like I consumed everything that I could, every audiobook, every anything. I was going to say podcast, but I don't think there were podcasts yet.
Well, so tell me about what you did when you were sitting. You're by yourself. It's kind of this little thinking and strategic planning retreat by yourself.
Yep.
What did you do? What was your method? Or was there one? Or you just kind of sat there with an empty piece of paper and a pen?
That first one, I was kind of winging it. But I mean, it was like year after year, I would refine it. And then we finally did the first event where it was more formalized into a binder. That was in 2013, December 2013. And I'd say every year it's gotten a little tweaked a little bit, like maybe let's add this, or let's put this thing here and every time. But in that first one, I was just thinking really is like, what's all the stuff that I do? What are all the things that I'm doing? And then what are the things that I'm doing that I don't have to be the one doing? And who else could do those things? Like start like just kind of listing out all of the stuff that I was doing. And then like looking at it like an inventory list of just stuff that I do every day. And then it was, some of it you'd be embarrassed to show other people that you do yourself. And some of it you could just cut out completely. Really, it doesn't really even, it's not even worth doing. And then there's stuff that somebody could probably do for $5 to $8 an hour in the Philippines. And then there's stuff that, if you just gave the people on your team the training and the tools and some of your time, they could probably get up to speed on it and could take it over. Maybe would even want to take it over.
Well, it sounds to me like you created something I refer to as a load list, and all the load, everything that's on you. And it's so cool that we're talking, because you and I do so many things, like we're doing the same stuff. You're very successful at it. You've done really well at it, and I'm envious of your success.
Same.
But I think it's really cool that what you just described is session 1 of my group coaching platform that I take people through. Is create a load list, because you don't know what you got to get rid of until you know what's on the list. You got to make the list first. So it's very, very curious, very curious.
Yeah.
So you did this. So you did this load list that I refer to as load list. You did this load list.
I said to myself, I need to create a load list.
And then you got to offload. Actually, the reason I call it a load list, there's this guy, when I was working on my doctorate degree, which I didn't finish, by the way, but I was working on it, I studied a guy by the name of Howard Yale McCluskey, who was a sociologist who studied gerontology, which is study of older people. And he came up with a theory called the theory of power load margin. And I'll make this really fast, but essentially what he said is that margin can only happen when the power to do stuff exceeds the load. In other words, all the stuff that has to be done. So the power has to exceed the load there, and that's where margin happens. And so he didn't apply it to business, but I took it as a coach, as a business person, and said, hey, this is a good thing for entrepreneurs to learn. So the power is all the things we get, like you said, podcasts, reading books, audio books, watching YouTube channels. That gives us power. And then the load is all the crap we got to get rid of. And then when we get power in excess of the load, then we have margin, and that's where success happens. So that's why I call it load, because of Howard McCluskey. Well,
Shout out. Hashtag McCluskey.
That's right. Yeah. He was, I think he wrote that in it was in the 60s or 70s, I think maybe. I don't think he's with us anymore, but, So you did Plan the Attack. You did this event. What was that first event like? How many people showed up?
It was cool because I'd say 2 or 3 weeks before the event, not one person had signed up. And then, I forget what it was. I think I was like committed to $10,000 at the ballroom I got a really fancy place and everything, full like breakfast, lunch, everything paid for. I wanted it to be like a really nice day. And I remember I was like, had it at an area where companies that offered services that entrepreneurs would benefit from could have like a little table and stuff, and they could be sponsors. And I remember, so there's nobody, literally it's a few weeks away, 0 sponsors, 0 attendees. And I'm like ready to puke on myself. And and I remember on the same day I got a sponsor and a first attendee, which really made me want to puke all over myself, because I could have just quietly like never done the event and nobody would have even remembered or noticed. But I was like, oh God, how embarrassing. Now I've got an attendee and a sponsor. And I remember thinking, oh, I'll introduce them to each other. I'll make sure they meet each other when I'll introduce the attendee to the sponsor. But then over those last few weeks, it ended up going to, I think we had 40 or 50 people in the room, which was pretty cool because I was nervous. I booked a room that could hold like 30 or something. And then we ended up moving into the next room over, which was luckily still available.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
Hey, I want to talk with you about one of my favorite tools as a salesperson and as an entrepreneur, and that tool is Dub. I want you to imagine for a minute getting an email from somebody, and instead of just being the plain old crappy text in an email, rather than just having a bunch of HTML where it's pictures and stuff, what if it was a video and the video had a little GIF and it was playing right there in the email as soon as you opened it, and it had your name? Like it said, hello, Jason, check this out. And then you clicked play and it played right there in your inbox in the window. And it was somebody trying to tell you how great you are, or how awesome, how good they can help you out. That is the power of video emails. I want you to try Dub out. I've been using it for years. I have closed countless millions of dollars in sales over the last, 6 years or so using Dub. And you can do it too. All you got to do is go to therealjasonduncan.com/dub. That's DUBB. Therealjasonduncan.com/dub. Dub will help you make an impact in your sales through video. It's going to help you with, they've even got a CRM built into it. You can build landing pages. You can do campaigns, even SMS campaigns. You can set up automations to manage workflows and maximize conversions. And like I said, they've got an existing software platform inside Dub to take your CRM to the next level. Try this out. Get a free special just by being a listener to the podcast. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/dub. Get 2 weeks to try it for free and 50% off your first 2 months. That's therealjasonduncan.com/dub.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
So what was your ticket price on that?
I think it was probably about $500.
Oh, so $500. You had 40.
It was $1,000, but if you registered in advance, I was willing to do it for 50%, which was $500. Okay. But we filled up all the spots, and so nobody had to pay the last minute price, so it was $500.
Okay, so 500 times it's 50 people. So it's $25,000. Covers your costs of doing the event, maybe some sponsorships there too. And it was good enough for you to continue doing that. You actually made that a thing, right?
Yeah, for sure. And for me, it wasn't if I broke even, I would have been thrilled. it wasn't at all about the revenue or the profit at all. I mean, I was, obviously an entrepreneur, don't want to do something that you don't think you have a chance to, have that happen. But I just wanted to make that event go from something I thought about for years to like an actual day. And I mean, it was amazing. It was like amazing. At the end of the day, I was like trying to say my last few words without crying. And my wife and I were like celebrating after it was over. And I was just like, one of those times where just like, that was amazing. It was amazing.
What year was this?
2013, December, right. 2013.
So December of 13, you do the first plan the attack. And then where did the idea of the group, the 12 Mavens group, come from?
Yeah, I had that idea. I mean, it was out of necessity. Like back a few years before that, as I was growing and I was, holding on to the boat metaphorically, I remember making, I was growing really fast, and I was in Fortune magazine and CNN Money and all this stuff, which makes you, guns blazing, except, it was a bumpy ride. Growing really fast can be really expensive, and it can be super stressful. And I knew that I would try things that could explode. Like I remember, doing something I thought for sure would work out and burning 6 figures in a few months of like actual cash, not pipeline or perceived value, like actual money in the bank, like burning it. And I was like in my early 30s, and that was like devastating. And I remember thinking, damn it, if I had just reached out to other smart, successful entrepreneurs, maybe a couple years further along than me, I know that they would have saw all the holes in my plan, and they would have like asked me questions that would make me think, oh, that's true. Oh, yeah. And so I ended up putting together a group of really smart, successful entrepreneurs that I admired. We were all about the same age, but they were just badasses, just crushing it. Like some of them have had like multiple hundreds of $1 million exits since then. But I put together this insane group of like really smart entrepreneurs, and we started meeting together. Can I say a semi bad word?
Yeah, it's up to you.
Okay. But we called ourselves, it was achieving success simultaneously helping others learn, evolve, and succeed, or just ASSHOLES for short. But it was kind of funny because we'd introduce each other, like we'd run into one of the other members and their spouse and be like, oh, this, so the guy would be like, oh, this is Jeff. He's the guy who started, he's like one of the assholes, should I say that? But awesome. We did it, but except it was just casual. It was just, we'd go, we'd maybe have some drinks, and we'd end up maybe talking about the Super Bowl. Or I remember one time 2 guys were talking about a hair loss prevention remedy for like 25 minutes. And I was thinking, I'd rather be watching a movie with my wife, if we're just going to sit here and do this. I want to have conversations that are going to help me mitigate risks, that are going to help me grow my business, that are going to help me reduce the stress I'm feeling. And sometimes only 2 of us would show up. Sometimes we go 3-4 months without doing a meeting until one of us ran into another one and be like, yeah, we need to get together. It was too casual. Or sometimes we'd spend the whole night talking about like one person's problem. And then these 2 that had a really bad problem never even got a chance to get helped. And so I remember during those meetings thinking, if I ever sold this business and could do whatever I want, I would love to do something like this, but with structure, with a framework, more professional, and really try to do it in a way where making sure everybody's going to get value out of it.
Well, what it seems like to me is that, I'm looking at your 12 Mavens website, is that it's dedicated to the idea of there's these entrepreneurs and CEOs are in the weeds. They're stuck. They're running 80 plus, just like you did, 80 plus hours a week, beating their chest that they're outworking everybody else, when they're really not living their ideal lives. They're not living the life that they thought that entrepreneurship should be able to provide them. As going back to your boat analogy, they're being drugged behind the boat, and while somebody else is doing the backflips next to them, and they don't understand. And 12 Mavens seems to be an opportunity for people to join something to learn how to get out of that struggle. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's what's been amazing to me is seeing highly successful entrepreneurs that still get a ton out of it. You know, it's like nobody's at the finish line. There's always something you can get better at or learn more about, or, no smart entrepreneur is as smart as a whole group of smart entrepreneurs combined together. It's like when you think of your biggest challenge, your biggest frustration, and you put it out there for others and you say, like, I'm trying to figure out the best way to whatever. And then you have all these different people in all these different industries, all, bouncing ideas off of each other and like adding to the last comment. And it just gives you access to things you just would have never had access to. I mean, I think when somebody says that something amazing that happened after Plan the Attack, it feels good, but I also know really the hero is that they took that much time to just think about all that stuff and actually write it down. In a 12 Mavens meeting, the hero isn't you want to have a good facilitator, but it's the power of multiple brains combined together, Do
you consider 12 Mavens to be a traditional mastermind, or do you refer to it as something different?
I don't know. I mean, I use the word, there's so many ways to describe it: a mastermind, a peer group, a round table. I don't really have a lot of experience in other groups. I don't know. I mean, there's some that have similarities and some that are different. I'm sure there's, they all have the thing in common is leveraging the combined brain power of multiple ideas.
Yeah.
That's what they have in common. The way they do it can be really different.
So what do you define success as? I mean, you've been successful in a lot of different things. How does Jeff Davis define that word success?
That's a great question. And I think it's important that people don't feel like any other person's definition of success is what has to be their definition, right? So you could hear a successful person talk about what success is, and you have to, it could be true and it could be right, but it also could be not success for you. Because I know for me personally, I never wanted to be celebrating revenue with wife number 6. I didn't want to be like pounding my chest about how big my company was and I'm completely out of shape and I get tired after walking like down the street. I didn't want to, I didn't want to die younger than I could have if I didn't have so much stress in my life, but there are as many different ways to be successful as there are successful people. So to answer your question, for me, only speaking for myself, success is being genuinely happy in your life.
So with that,
whatever that means to you.
Well, so with that as a definition, which I don't disagree with, and certainly all of your lead up is very much appreciated to that answer. But with that as your definition of success, are you a successful person?
Yes, I am successful. But and for me also, to elaborate more on success, because I have friends that have way more money than me for sure. It is easy to like walk into an 11,000 square foot house on the water with an elevator and kind of feel like, I'm a loser, just like a knee jerk reaction when you do it. But then you're like, I've spent more time with my kids than probably 99.9% of the dads on the planet. Maybe half of them wouldn't want to, but for me, that was what winning looked like, to be able to have all these adventures together, to be able to go around the world together. But I think it's important also to mention that there is no perfect like unicorns and rainbows for anybody every day, all day. So I say, yes, I am successful, but for sure, I could get an email that's like breaks my heart or like makes me feel like I'm not being successful, you know?
Yeah. Well, it changes, and I appreciate your lead up to your answer is that success is very much a personal thing. There's a dictionary definition of success in terms of just getting the results that you hope for.
What do they say? What's Webster's got to say?
Yeah, but for all of us, the results that we hope for are very different, you know. And I admire what you're doing with your kids. I'm very much a family focused guy. My wife's number one. My kids are right there. You know, that my family is the most important thing, and so for me, that is part of success for me. But another person might say, until I own that new Ferrari, I'm not successful. Or until I own that 11,000 square foot house on the lake, I'm not successful. But and that's fine if that's their definition.
And if I can't, and I will say for the people that feel like until I get that Ferrari, I won't be successful. I sold my company and I bought a Maserati with a Ferrari engine, and I remember parking it at, I'm feeling, I checked that box or whatever. And I parked it at my kid's school at the time, which was kind of a fancy school. And I remember a guy parking his Maserati right next to me, like another dad that was like a little bit fancier version maybe. And thinking like, oh, like, it's probably not as good as his, or whatever. But it's like, there's always a fancier car.
Comparison is such a thief to joy.
Yeah. Yes.
It robs our joy of so many things, because there's lots of memes and pictures on Instagram and other places where it shows one person being very happy with their bicycle, riding down the street next to a person who's in a car, who's looking at the guy in the Ferrari, who's looking at the guy in the helicopter. And then there's just all these different perspectives of what you've got. And that comparison it will rob us of joy. And I wish that I could just flip a switch in my brain to not give a blank about what other people think, but it doesn't work that way. And
we could say bad words.
Yeah, well,
I'm just kidding.
I tell my kids, my kids are older now, but I tell my kids there are no good words. There are no bad words. They're just words used inappropriately. So, well, to do that, I want to ask you something specific about these 7 particular things.
Yep.
This is what I talked about in your intro, is that this life-changing leap from being stuck in the weeds to really fulfilling your vision is based on these 7 particular things. So I don't want to go deep, obviously, but what are these 7 particular things? Yeah.
And some of them were kind of interwoven. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah.
Interwoven into sort of my story. And like the first thing that I did was I mapped out a detailed plan. So it wasn't just kind of in my head. It wasn't, I'm just sort of thinking, I need to do this, I'm going to do this. It was like, I actually went and mapped out a plan. Maybe it's going to be revised and improved, as you go, but I had a plan. And then the second thing I did was I started to, build out a support team. And that was, one of the things I mentioned about, if other people get the tools and the training and some of your time to learn how to do some of these things, or to outsource it, or, the other people that can take some of this weight off of you. And then in that process is usually when you learn that you suck at delegating, because this one didn't, this one's taken forever to do it. And this one didn't do it the way I wanted. And then actually taking time to master the art and science of delegation. And I mean, there are trainable ways to delegate more effectively than if you just say, here, can you do this? And then another big thing was actually systematizing the way the business ran. That's what's so great about a franchise, is that's what you're buying, is it's all figured out. Here's exactly how everything works, and how like some franchises can have a bunch of 16-year-olds running a $2 million operation, because it's so systematized and figure out where most entrepreneurs we're more like a visionary thinker, and we got an idea. And when it comes to like the details, we're just completely uninterested. Like managing it, actually like measuring it, we're like, eh. But that's why it's a lot of times it's good to offset that type of person with like an execution operations type of person. But if you don't have that other person, it's a lot harder. But systematizing, figuring out what is the process, what is the way that we generate leads, what is the way that somebody should let you know they're not coming into the office today, what is the way that we handle our accounts receivables, what is the way, like step by step, so that your business could be a franchise, even if you don't want to, but it's built so that it could be. And then, making the time to learn how to do all the kind of stuff that we're talking about. So like I commend people that take the time to listen to stuff like this and level up. You never know, that one little tiny tweak in how you're doing something that you pick up from something like this could end up being life-changing. I've seen that happen so many times, but making the time to continue to learn, that would be the fifth thing. And then the sixth thing is to get over the guilt of, if you've had, like me, your years of being first in, last out. You could have guilt issues where you feel like you have to be first one in and last out. I've always believed in like lead from the front kind of mentality. But at the same time, if you've taken the risk and you've put in all the work, then, the benefits, the privileges of that hard work, it should be there as well. So get over the guilt or the ego, feeling like I'm the star of the team. And it's like if the star football player gets hurt and then the team can't win without them, that's not a good team. That's not a good coach. That's not a good organization. So get over it and hope that they do it better than you. And, don't let your ego, sometimes people almost subconsciously can self-sabotage because they're almost subconsciously afraid that they won't be as much of the star as they thought that they had to be. And which kind of goes to like the limiting beliefs, just get over the guilt, ego, limiting beliefs. And then the seventh thing is leveraging other entrepreneurs and CEOs' hindsight and the power of group thinking combined with some accountability. There's no explaining our indifference to ourselves. We'll die for our family and we'll work these hours that we would never ask an employee to work, for whatever reason. But everybody has learned things the hard way. Sometimes you can benefit so much from somebody's really bad experience. And as I said, no one's as smart as a whole bunch of smart people combined together. So
I love it. What's really funny, and I wrote all these down, is that folks who are familiar with my platform will know that your 7 steps and my 4, they intersect in so many places. You say in step number 6, get over the ego. I call that the hero syndrome, and that that we got to solve everything all the time. And then your 3rd step about mastering delegation is my 1st step. It's like you got to embrace delegation. And I actually teach, as you talked about, that there are ways to learn how to do it, because so many entrepreneurs either abdicate or confiscate. They think they're delegate, even though they rhyme, they don't. Actually,
my rhyme is not good enough.
Yeah. My TED talk this past year was actually on delegation. And I talked about that specific thing. So let me review these for everybody listening out. So number 1, map out a detailed plan. Number 2, build a support team. Number 3, master the art of delegation. Number 4, put systems in place, systematize everything. Number 5, make time to learn, to sit down and do it and learn how to do it. 6, get over the guilt and the ego, or as I call it, the hero syndrome. And then number 7, leverage other people's insights. And so Jeff's figured out, if you do these 7 things, you get out of the weeds, you can move on to that ideal life. And he and I are telling the same story, man. And
you can. And you can't, don't expect it to just go like perfectly smooth. It's, I bought a t-shirt one time that says destiny comes on broken wings. And to me, that meant that like, your destiny is there, but it's like sometimes you get there a little bit little bit beat up, and it's never quite as romantic as, the journey as you imagine, but you can for sure get there. If I went from working every single night, every single weekend, I mean, I would have dinner and go back to work for hours and hours. And I remember, to me, like, the dream life would be working my ass off all day, having dinner, and then not having to do anything else for the rest of the night. Like, to me, that was a fantasy. Like, I couldn't imagine it. And yeah, like you said, I'm in the south of France, and I'm able to go sit at a, hang out but still do work I like too.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on all your success. Your definition is being genuinely happy. And I agree that is a metric for success that people should embrace. So Thank you for your perspective. Thank you for being on the show. I'm going to give you the opportunity to have the last word to say, what advice would you give that early stage entrepreneur? So we've got entrepreneurs that are listening that are all over the board, very successful, very early. So if you had to speak a word of advice as you finish up this show with me today, what is your word of advice for those people in the early stages?
The people for the early stages of entrepreneurship, I would say it takes a lot of hard work. I've picked the brains like you have. I've picked the brains of a lot of really successful people. And I can't tell you how many times those two words came up when I was the young entrepreneur seeking advice. And it is true. But if you are willing to work hard and pay your dues, and it's going to be like that scene in Braveheart, probably for the whole first year of, having that sort out. You can for sure find a way or make one. But I would say you got to be doing something that's worth it, because you do eat a lot of poop sandwiches on that ride, and you got to be building something that is worth eating poop sandwiches. Does that make sense? So 100%. If you're just trying to chase some random thing just because it seems like maybe it'll make money, but you don't really care, you're not really that into it, after you're eating poop sandwiches every day, you're going to be like, you're going to quit. And it takes a lot of dark moments where you're not sure if you're going to be able to make it sometimes. So make sure it's worth it.
Well, thank you for that. And you are offering for all the listeners a free 30-minute strategy session if they want to work with you on how to achieve their net goals, their top objectives, biggest obstacles, deal with frustrations, all that. We're going to put the link to that in the show notes. It's a Calendly link, and I could read it to everybody, but it's going to be almost impossible to. Well, you know what? I'll do it just for those that are never going to look at the show notes. It's Calendly.com/Jeff, as in Jeff Davis, -471. So Jeff-471/ strategy-session. So again, very difficult to remember. I'll say it one more time. Yeah. Calendly.com/Jeff-471/ strategy-session. So we're going to put that in the show notes. So Jeff's giving that away free to podcast listeners that are listening to The Root of All Success. And Jeff, I very much appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you being on the show today. It's been an honor to talk to you. Enjoy the rest of your world tour as you're doing your victory lap, and hopefully we'll run into each other again in the near future.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll make sure we do.
All right. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Another very successful entrepreneur about his story of success. And what's interesting about this show today is how much Jeff's story and my story are similar in that what we do, and there's a lot of things that kind of coincide and overlap. But what I think you should take away from this show today with what Jeff is talking about is that what he's doing and what I'm doing match, which means this is possible. And there is a method to this madness of getting out of the weeds. You don't have to work 80 hours a week. You don't have to be the hero. You don't have to do everything. And so his 7-step plan and my 4-step plan, very similar in how those things work. And I'm going to, you heard me review those right there at the end of the show. So I'm not going to do it again, but you can go back and rewind and listen to that, but reach out, go take a look at Jeff. You can follow him on LinkedIn. He's on LinkedIn. You can look at him up at 12mavens.com. And the 12 is the numbers, don't spell out the word 12. It's 12mavens.com, but go check them out. It's an interesting peer group that you can get involved in. to help you get to that place. And of course, I do the same thing. I do it a little different than he does, but we're aiming for the same goal. And that's to get you out of the weeds, get you out of the daily operations of the business. And maybe you're wondering, am I even ready to do that? Well, let me offer something to you. Go to amireadytoexit.com, amireadytoexit.com. And there is a 100% free exit readiness assessment that my team and I created this to help entrepreneurs like you figure out where am I in this timeline? Am I 6 months away? Am I 6 years away? When would I be able to get out of the weeds? What might I need to do to get myself to that place? And so that you get a customized report, free, all free. Go to amireadytoexit.com to find out if in fact you are ready to exit. Well, tune in again next week when I talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. Until then, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. Are you an entrepreneur who feels trapped in the weeds of daily operations, not experiencing the freedom you thought you'd have as a business owner? Want to know the way out? Take Jason's free exit readiness assessment to see how close you are to getting ready to experience true freedom and success as an entrepreneur. Go to amireadytoexit.com today. That's amireadytoexit.com. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.